This video is partly in response to Boogie 2988, and obviously it's partly addressing this ongoing controversy concerning the meaning of freedom of speech in our lives. I want to ask a very simple question. If this is not permissible, what is? Boogie, you and I have more in common than you could possibly know. Everyone in the audience, you may think I don't have a whole hell of a lot in common with Boogie 2988. I do. Okay. Boogie, I understand that you feel that this website really damaged you emotionally, that it really negatively impacted your life. I understand and I sympathize. Okay. How many people are capable of positively appreciating criticism when it's directed at them? Boogie, you're not one of those people. All right. Like, definitionally, you are wrong here. Now, fate makes hypocrites of us all. I have heard the filmmaker Kevin Smith say so many times that he embraces criticism, he appreciates criticism, that he laughs at criticism, that he's immune to all these critics who say that he's a terrible filmmaker. As each film comes out, that they give it these negative reviews. And I've seen him put on this show of egoic invulnerability again and again and again. Kevin Smith, after Yoga Hosers came out, this guy sat down and read all the reviews of Yoga Hosers. Kevin Smith, after Tusk came out. Right? These are terrible, terrible films. And the vast majority of critics condemned them. And Kevin Smith put on this public show of indifference. And I notice he remembered distinctly and quoted the very few positive things said about those movies by just a few critics, right? And that's already a hint as to what a lie this is. Okay, Kevin Smith finally gets to live out his childhood dream, his childhood fantasy. And he creates a new cartoon series out of the He-Man legacy, the He-Man toys, the He-Man cartoons in the 1980s. Okay. And he's devastated by what the critics say. He's devastated by the opinions of random people on the internet who aren't even film critics. He's devastated by the condemnation of this creative project he was on. Look, I sympathize. You can sympathize with someone who is wrong. Boogie, as much as you may have suffered, I'm asking you and everyone like you to take a step back, look at this situation with real detachment, and question the extent to which you may be wrong. And to put it simply, if this isn't permissible, what is? We're living through a time when people have inculcated into them as children the notion that freedom of speech is a very lofty virtue and that it is only intended to be used for lofty purposes. If your neighbor is putting out the garbage one day, say they're rolling out the recycling bin and putting it on the sidewalk in front of the house, and you walk over to them and say, hey, you know what? I can tell by all these empty bottles in your fucking recycling bin, I can tell you're ruining your life by drinking alcohol. And this is why you're such a lousy parent. And this is why you're bad at your job. And this is why your career goes nowhere. And this is why you make noise that pisses me off as your neighbor. You got to get your life together and quit drinking. All right? A whole hell of a lot of you, especially if this happens to you. If the finger is being pointed at you, if the criticism is being directed your way, you are going to say, this isn't what freedom of speech is about. This isn't what Thomas Jefferson had in mind. This isn't what Benjamin Franklin had in mind with this whole freedom of speech thing. Yes, it is. All right. It's shocking. It's horrifying, especially when it happens to you. Your neighbor can stand there on the sidewalk and tell you that you're a lousy drunk. And they can take out their cell phone and they can film the glass bottles in your fucking recycling bin. And they can film you and say, look at this piece of shit alcoholic. If he doesn't fucking change his life, where's he going to be 5 years from now? Okay. That is freedom of speech. And it's hard to live with and it's hard to bear. But we've emerged from a culture in which everyone was trained to imagine that God was watching you all the time. So even if nobody else knows how many empty whiskey bottles are in the recycling bin, God knows. Even if nobody else is judging you, God is judging you. And just as we cease to believe in, just as we loosened our grip on this cultural conviction that there's a supernatural judge in the sky who's always watching you and always judging, we developed this technology that allows each of us to conduct surveillance on one another, each of us to evaluate one another, each of us to sit in judgment and be an arbiter over one another in precisely the way that we once fantasized God was doing for us. My own experience with Kiwifarms has been tremendously positive. And I really feel a debt of appreciation toward that website. On an earlier take of this video, someone pointed out that they had an experience, they had a memory of Googling around for information about a certain massacre, certain mass shooting. And I said, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, no, I'd forgotten. I didn't think of the website in that respect, but that's true. For some political events where, you know, what really happened and what the primary sources are, or what that guy's YouTube videos were before they were all deleted, what that guy's website looked like before it was deleted, whether you wanted to read the manifesto of the shooter or whatever it was, Kiwifarms was actually an important resource politically in that most directive ways. But coming back to my not too allegorical example of being confronted over how many empty bottles of liquor are sitting in front of your house or sitting on your lawn every day. I remember more than 5 years ago, maybe I'm wrong, I think more than 5 years ago, I remember people on Kiwifarms really doing the research into this YouTuber's life, this other YouTuber called Venus Angelic, and putting the pieces together and saying, look, this woman's problem, it isn't this, it isn't that. Her real problem is alcoholism. And I remember when I saw that on their website, I was doing fact checking for a video I was making myself. Whenever I went to that website, it was basically for fact checking purposes because I was making a video talking about ethics or politics or whatever I'm talking about. And I want to look up the record of, oh, what did this person say on this topic? What did that person say? You know, and people on Kiwifarms, they've done the research, you know, and they put all the evidence together for you. It's tremendously valuable. I remember they had screenshots to back it up. And there were people who had really figured out, you know, kind of how many days a week this woman was getting drunk and what kind of liquor she was drinking and so on, just by paying close attention to what she was exhibiting publicly, what she was posting, what she was sharing publicly. So there's no violation of privacy there, right? But I understand how when the finger is pointed at you, you feel like your privacy is being violated, right? You feel that way, even if it's not true. I'm sure Venus Angelic felt that way. Here are all these people on the internet saying that she's an alcoholic and giving evidence to back it up. But guess how the story ends? Years later, she admitted that she was an alcoholic. Years later, she checked into a mental hospital to get treatment and help her sober up, go through the withdrawal symptoms and so on. And she realized she'd been completely in denial about this. She'd been lying to herself that alcoholism had been a huge factor in her life up to that point. So, like, not only is this kind of true, not only does this gossip have a kind of journalistic integrity to it, it could have potentially been helpful for her. And I'm sorry, but Boogie, if you see this video, you have to reflect on that too, right? Like this stuff that you feel is violating your privacy, all right, on Kiwifarms. You're not capable of looking back and feeling like this could have helped you. Now, look, again, we're in a period of transition. What is the meaning of privacy? What is the meaning of freedom of speech? These things are changing right now. That's why this conversation is worth having. That's why this is worth fighting for politically. I remember once when I felt doxxed, like I felt like my privacy had been invaded, and I had to sit there and question it. And as you'll hear, I came to the conclusion that I was in the wrong. You know what I mean? I had a discussion about my own childhood. I forget if it was a YouTube video or a live stream. And I mentioned, even though I grew up in Canada, because of the peculiar town where my father got a job as a museum curator, I grew up hearing the sound of lions roaring as I fell asleep at night. And decades later, toward the end of my time in university at the University of Toronto, I actually met an African immigrant who mentioned this, who mentioned falling asleep with the sound of lions roaring and the way that sound carries. And I was just like, I know exactly what you mean. Many years after that, when I was living in China, I met another man who had grown up in Africa, had more or less the same conversation again. And let me tell you something. I assume this is a result of millions of years of evolution. But even if it's not that loud, that distinctive sound of a lion roaring, you wake up. And you wake up all the way. Like there's something in you genetically. You're alert. You know what I mean? When you're a little kid, I think there are certain things you respond to. I remember when I was a little kid seeing a snake winding through the grass and how vividly, you perceive that. I think there are some things where your instincts kick in. Anyway, so I described this, strange chapter from my childhood. Despite the fact this was in Southern Ontario, because my father had this peculiar job in this peculiar place, right? And someone gave the exact location in the comments. Someone gave the address, like the full mailing address for where this was. Now, I was trying to conceal it. It wasn't like I thought consciously, like, oh, gee, I should really regard it as private information. Exactly what safari theme park I'm talking about, or exactly what road this was on. Obviously, there's enough information there for people to put the pieces together. I remember, was just shocked in that moment. And I don't know if I sat there for 30 seconds or 60 seconds thinking about it. It wasn't a real long time. But you thought, you know what? There's nothing wrong here. Like at this moment, I just wasn't expecting to see that. I don't know that address myself. Like if you torture me, I can't tell you what the address was of that house I lived in. You know what I mean? I never knew it. I was a little kid at the time. I didn't know it then. I don't know it now. But like, you know what? Actually, your mailing address is not private information. If you want it to be private information, you will have to write an amendment to the Constitution. All right. There was another YouTuber, Unnatural Vegan, and she used to have her full legal name on her website until one of her fans wrote into her and said, look, this is your address, this is your phone number, this is where you got your college degree. Like, here's all this information we can get instantly just because you have your name online. And when that guy wrote into her to tell her that, then she started using a pseudonym. And, I'm not saying her real name is impossible to figure out, but she tried to make it more difficult to figure out her real name. Okay. But in our society, I don't even care where the hell you're watching this. I don't know anywhere in the world that's an exception. Like, this is not just the United States of America, not just the former British colonies. All right. Your mailing address is considered public information. It's not private. All right. And we all have to live with that. All right. And not just as a public figure, as a private figure. No, I mean, I had another moment like this where you feel bad about it. In this case, I'd say for a few hours instead of just a few seconds. And you have to reflect on it. One of you guys, one of my viewers, somehow got my address and ordered a book and sent it to me. And I would describe it as an anti-Semitic book. You can't say that it was a neo-Nazi book because it was actually from one of the distinctively left-wing schools of thought that are, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So this person ordered and sent me a copy of this book to my real mailing address. And looking at the details of the package and the way the address was written, it's probably someone who's an employee of Amazon. Alternate theory, I've been very careful not to photograph my own address and post it to Instagram or have it in a YouTube video. But what if there's a box from Amazon with my address stated in exactly that way, right? Because there's more than one way to phrase the address. It was the same way it's on our Amazon page, right? What if I actually had a box in the background and they copied that and it's not an employee, right? Okay, so you get that. You think, all right, there's someone out there, there's some anti-Semitic person who watched my videos and probably hates me. And they know where I live. And they sent me this book. So as I say, in this case, I didn't just think about it for 30 seconds or something. I thought about it for a couple hours, I'm sorry, I have one witness to this. Melissa was in the apartment with me at the time. It wasn't that big a deal, but we talked about it. And what I remember saying to her was, look, it comes with the territory. You want to be a public figure? Do you want to run for mayor? Do you want to stand in elections for city council? Do you want to do your part, in parliament or Congress or anything else? It comes with the territory. Like, you really have to be willing. I can't even describe this as a risk, right? I mean, so guys, again, talk about doxing yourself. I did a live stream recently that I had to stop because the police pulled up in a van right at my door, right at my window, and jumped out of the car doors suddenly. And they were all swarming around, this huge number of police. It was right there. Today, there have been drug addicts right on that sidewalk, however you want to put it, right out my window, close enough that I could hit them with a snowball, close enough that I could open my window and crumple up paper and throw it at them. They're right there. They're close enough to make eye contact with me through my window. What is risk? What is danger? Moving to Cambodia to do humanitarian work is risk. All right. Moving to Laos, there's risk. And, in another way, when I moved to Saskatchewan to study Cree and Ojibwe, to try to study First Nations languages, try to get involved with that kind of humanitarian work, frankly, there's risk involved. You're risking something. Okay. A Boogie, what do you think you're risking with the fact that people know your address? You know, and like, you know, again, I do sympathize. I do. Boogie, you and I have more in common than anyone in the audience could possibly know. And we deal with a lot of the same problems more than anyone is ever going to know. And this problem in particular, we have in common because even though my audience is much smaller, right, the things I talk about, they hate me for much more passionately, including anti-Semitism, fascism, all that stuff. I'm genetically Jewish, in case you hadn't guessed, you know, including my critique of drug addicts and drug addiction, my critique of communism, my critique of all these really kind of all these political issues that are dangerous to have opinions about. Okay, there's more risk for me in literally walking out my front door. I have to do that every day. I literally have to push my way past drug addicts who sometimes are in the act of smoking from a crack pipe. I don't think it is crack. I think it's meth, but we say crack pipe. Sometimes they're in the act of injecting themselves. Injections have gone out of style here now that fentanyl is so popular, right? Sometimes they're actually using the drugs at that moment when I have to walk past them, right? Sometimes they're passed out. They're just completely, you know, unconscious on the sidewalk, right? Sometimes they're freaking out, right? For me to walk from here to the nearest bakery, for me to walk from here to the bank, for me to walk, you know, all right, like I live in Canada. I'm not allowed to carry a gun. I'm not allowed to carry a weapon of any kind. All right. I live with that risk and that danger every day for nothing. There's no positive outcome. None. Zero. There's no point. You just endure it. You just suffer. It's just meaningless, aimless, pointless misery. And guys, so I live in the Pacific Northwest. So it's the same here. Seattle is a hellhole. Portland, Oregon is a hellhole. Vancouver is a hellhole. This whole region, it's terrible. But you know, I remember what it was like dealing with the same shit back in Perpignan, France. So this is the corner of France, right by the border with Spain, multicultural area in that way. Being surrounded by hard drug addicts and drug addicts being in the same apartment building with you and drug addicts forcing their way in through the door, you know, like you got a lock system, all right? And me being on my P's and Q's and me being ready to have a fist fight at a moment's notice all the time. And the cops showing up to deal with my neighbor. I would guess in the neighbor's case, it was cocaine just from his behavior. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and it was methamphetamine, but that would be my guess. You know, all right, like your life is going to be a struggle either way. Do you want to have a meaningful struggle or a meaningless one? All right, because I'm just being real with you. Like, yeah, you know what? It's fucked up having people go after your mom, which my audience has done. You know what I mean? It's fucked up having torrents of anti-Semitic comments directed at you and directed at your mom. You know, yeah, you know what? It's fucked up, but it's not pointless. Like, this is about something. This is a struggle for something. And, you know, in that morass of mean-spirited, judgmental people, in that morass of people who are fundamentally stupid and malign, all right? When I look at Kiwifarms, I'm not looking at the worst of human nature. I'm looking at the best. If there were terrible things on Kiwifarms as a website, I never saw them. And there's a significant footnote here. I wasn't looking for them. What I saw on Kiwifarms was a kind of subculture of people who, above all else, respected the facts, the search for the truth, and a process that was both journalistic and juridical in really hearing out all sides of the story, really seeking out, combining, concatenating all of the evidence from all the different perspectives. What I saw on Kiwifarms was people who were willing to listen to several hours of my videos before judging me. Okay? Nobody in my own family has ever done that for me. All of my fucking blood relations judge me and treat me like shit. They aren't going to watch a 1 hour YouTube video. They aren't going to watch 3 hour-long YouTube videos and compare them and put the evidence together. Nobody in my own family has ever treated me with as much respect as gossip mongers on Kiwifarms who hate my guts. Like, yeah, there were people on Kiwifarms who liked me and appreciated me and say, yeah, you know, I appreciate this guy's videos. Here's my perspective on this controversy. It's true, that exists. But there were plenty of people who say, I hate this guy. They normally say, I think he's pretentious, or they hate veganism, or they're religious people and they hate atheism. I'm an advocate for atheism. You know, they say they hate me. They say whatever the reason they have for hating me. And then they say, but this rumor people are saying about him isn't true. I looked into it. This is the rumor people are making up, but look, here are the facts. You know, your own parents won't do that for you. Your own parents, my own parents were never willing to do that for me. My own parents were never willing to hear 2 sides of a story. They were never willing to hear 1 side of a story. And I don't even mean they have to watch the YouTube video. I mean face to face. They won't talk it through with me. They judge you, they condemn you, they write you off, they dismiss everything you fucking have to say after that on the basis of no evidence at all. None. All right, that's how my parents have treated me my whole fucking life. Kiwifarms has been better to me. My professors at university, it's like the same shit but worse. It's on the basis of like 10 seconds of information, like 10 seconds of contact between you and a professor. And even if the professor doesn't think they're ruining your life, like they don't think they're consciously out to get you or ruin your life, professors do have the power to ruin your life. They do have the power to really fuck up your life in a way that random fans on the internet don't, right? And bro, you know, no professor, the professors I've dealt with here, University of Victoria, for example, they are not even willing to hear 1 side of the story, let alone 2 sides, let alone 3 sides. They are not willing to go through the evidence and compare and contrast. Oh, at this time he said this, at this time he did that. You know, we live in a world of people who are so judgmental and so hostile. And look, I've just got to say this. Boogie 2988, this may not be your experience, but this is mine, okay? I was a member of a puritanical religion, Orthodox Theravada Buddhism. I was a respected scholar in that religion. I could give you examples of how respected I was. Not worth digressing into it, okay? Within that religion, I was a kind of authority figure. I could give you a bunch of stories about that. To say that there were people who looked up to me is a fucking understatement, all right? You know, do you know what it's like to have someone say to you that when you die, you're going to hell, when they really believe it? Do you know what it's like to have someone say to you that you're an agent of Satan, that you're working for the devil to destroy Buddhism from within? And those people, those puritanical people, they don't even hear 1 side of the story. They don't listen to a 1 hour YouTube video or compare and contrast a bunch of different videos or statements. They don't look at screenshots. They don't Google around to look at your history. They don't look at the articles you've published. You know, it's more relevant than that. They don't evaluate your perspective at all. All right. And like, look, sorry, I just mentioned the university professors again, right? There are university professors who will judge you and dismiss you for being a communist on the basis of 1 question you asked in class. And there are professors who will judge you and condemn you and dismiss you for being a right-winger, for being a right-wing conservative on the basis of one comment or one question you asked in class, right? They don't put your name into Google. They don't watch your YouTube videos. In my case, like I'm going to university and I have a stacked CV. I've published articles and shit. They don't look at your past ranks. They don't ask you. They don't even hear one side of the story, right? Well, Kiwifarms treated me better than my professors. And those people don't owe me anything, all right? If I'm paying $5,000 to take a university course, my professor owes me $5,000 worth of education. They owe me a certain amount of time. And it's normally written into your contract, the university. If you look into the details of your students' rights document or whatever, they're supposed to listen to you for a certain amount of time too. They're not just supposed to talk and lecture, whether that's office hours or in-class Q&A or whatever it is. They're not just supposed to do the talking. They're supposed to listen. They're supposed to get to know you. They're supposed to help you. They're supposed to care. They don't, all right? And I'm saying to you with zero irony, Boogie2988, my experience with Kiwifarms is that they are a bunch of people who care. Even if they hate you, even if they criticize you, even if they condemn you. Some people can appreciate criticism, even when it's directed towards them. I'm one of those people. I really relish intelligent criticism. I relish well-intentioned criticism. But frankly, even if the criticism is kind of mean-spirited, if it's intelligent, if it's insightful, if it's factual, if it's valid, I think that's great. On the internet, it's scarce. And Kiwifarms is one of the only places, I've ever seen it. And look, guys, this is, I'm going to have to ask this for the rest of my life. There's no answer to this question. I'm just going to have to ask myself this again and again and again. Why is it that complete strangers on Kiwifarms who hate my guts, who often begin their statement by saying, well, I really hate this guy, but, why is it that those people on Kiwifarms treated me so much better than my fellow vegans in the vegan movement? Like, if that's the standard, if that's how we're calibrating this, right? I was a prominent voice in the vegan movement for how many years? There was so much evidence of who I was and what I represented politically and what my specific opinion was on every conceivable topic under the vegan rubric. What does this guy say about castrating your pet cat? What does this guy say about, riding domesticated horses? Like, what does this guy say about killing insects or something? Every conceivable topic within veganism, I'm on the record on. What does this guy say about different methods of activism, fundraising, everything, right? There's an encyclopedic, exhaustive information on the internet available. My fellow vegans, other people who say they're in this movement with me, right? Other people who say they're trying to save the planet, trying to save the world, trying to make the world a better place, trying to save the animals, trying to save human lives, who have all these fucking lofty goals and ambitions. Why did they treat me so much worse than strangers who hated my guts on Kiwifarms? Okay, I'm going to tell you why. Because it fucking comes down to active research and informed opinion. All right? The people on Kiwifarms, that's the reality of what freedom of speech is. Most people do not use freedom of speech for lofty purposes. Okay? Freedom of speech doesn't only exist for and doesn't only apply to these lofty purposes that your high school textbooks told you about. If you don't believe me, read the fucking newspapers from 1776. Look at the reality of what fucking journalism was in the United States of America for 15 years leading up to the revolution, and frankly, keep going. And look at 15 years afterwards. It was nasty. It was brutal. It was dangerous. And people beat each other up, and people fought duels, and people got killed, and people showed up at the newspaper office with a gang of goons and physically smashed the printing press. Like, dude, what freedom of the press meant in 15 years leading up to the American Revolution and 15 years afterwards. You think you live on the edge, Boogie2988? You think you're taking a fucking risk? And look, again, I'll say it about myself, self-critically. Like, do I think it's so dangerous that some fucking neo-Nazi sends me a book and figures out my address? That some anti-Semitic person sends me a book in the mail and I feel kind of threatened or freaked out for a minute? Okay. Is it such a big deal that any of you guys can figure out the exact address of the primary school I went to, the exact address of where that house is, where I could hear the lions roaring when I was a kid? I've referred to a whole bunch of my ex-girlfriends, and I never use their names. I just say my blonde ex-girlfriend. She has fucking websites. She's on the internet. You can figure out who she is. You can. Is that doxing? Is that freedom of speech? You know what I'm saying? You could just, you could do the work. You can put that together. And of course, people figure out who my mom is, whatever. I've had my mom appear in YouTube videos on my channel, by the way. My dad too now. Like, what the fuck? This is just like Kevin Smith. When criticism is directed your way, all of a sudden you want it to be a fucking thought crime. All of a sudden you want to say that freedom of speech only exists for these lofty. It's a lofty principle that should only exist when it's being used for these lofty purposes. Well, you're goddamn wrong. Now, most people are not willing to examine their own lives. They have to pay a therapist. They have to pay a fucking psychoanalyst to do the analysis for them. And you know what a therapist is never going to say to you? You know what an analyst is never going to say to you? Exactly what the fuck they're saying on Kiwifarms. Like, I'm just being real with you. I think somebody like Venus Angelic could be helped by the criticism on Kiwifarms. Say, yeah. She says this is her issue. She says this is her issue. But guess what? Her problem is really alcoholism. Well, they were goddamn right. And it was an opinion based on research. It was an opinion based on putting together facts. You can't pay a therapist enough to do that for you. A therapist, it's crazy, but it's fucking true. A therapist will never scroll through your goddamn Instagram account or your Twitter and think about how many nights a week you're getting drunk. But your fans will, your frenemies will, these fucking gossip mongers on Kiwifarms will. And it helps people. If it doesn't help Venus Angelic herself, it helps people in the audience who are willing to listen, willing to reflect, and willing to think about their own lives critically. And that's the same about you, Boogie298. That's the same about me when I'm criticizing TKO Sam or when I'm criticizing Anissian. I don't think I'm going to help TKO Sam. I don't think I'm going to help Anissian. I think I'm going to help you and you and you out of the audience. A few people that by us investigating this, by us criticizing it. If you want to, I have said many times publicly that I do believe in censorship. I do support censorship. But censorship has to follow objectively real, independently verifiable criteria that are applied to all ideologies equally. Okay? Like Kevin Smith, you can't just censor the negative movie reviews. You can't just censor the people who say that your film is terrible and not censor the people who say that your film is good. Boogie2988, same comment. If you have a rule that on Instagram, nobody is allowed to show their nipple, it doesn't matter if it's a left-wing nipple or a right-wing nipple. A nipple is a nipple and applies to fucking everyone equally, all right? You have to have rules that are simple, clear, objectively verifiable, apply to all cultures equally, apply to all political persuasions equally. And as soon as everyone knows those rules, they can play within them. And look, guys, if you don't like the rules on YouTube, create a competitor to YouTube. If you don't like the rules on Instagram, if you don't like the rules on Twitter, create a competitor where people will play by different rules. I have had YouTube videos censored and in some cases completely deleted because they had quote unquote images of violence. I'm talking about war. I've got images of war. It's violence. It's not me torturing someone. It's not me beating someone up. It's, like we're talking about war and politics, really important things. And yeah, I have some images of war. What are you telling me? CNN gets to show the same image on YouTube and they aren't censored, but I am. All right. All these different news broadcasters, right? BBC, ABC, whatever, NBC, they're all on YouTube showing the same image. And when they show that image, it's allowed. And when I show it, it's not. Okay. Now, this applies to the discussion of coronavirus. It applies to so many things. And what they're saying is, no. For you, this is thinkable. And for you, it's unthinkable. All right. You can't devise these rules in a way that whereby speech and criticism is only permissible when it lives up to your subjective standards of what is best in human nature. All right. I'll tell you what's worst about human nature, and I'll tell you what's best. The worst thing is voluntary ignorance. All right. And that's what I've dealt with again and again and again. I've dealt with it in the Buddhist religion. I've dealt with it in my own family. And I've dealt with it in this fucking doomed political cause called the vegan movement. The worst fucking thing is to deal with somebody who says, well, look, I don't know the facts and I'm not going to look into it. And I'm not going to click on this article and do the reading. And I'm not going to watch the YouTube video. I'm not going to hear two sides of the story. Sometimes they don't even want to hear one. I have my mind made up about this, and that's that. I'm going to just choose to remain ignorant forever. And guys, yeah, that can be some other vegan YouTuber talking about you. And that can be the professor at the university, right? And that can be a Buddhist monk. And it can be a Buddhist professor or a Buddhist head of a charity. It can be a religious authority figure like that. And you know what? It can be your own goddamn parents and your own grandparents too. All right. You fucking tell me what kind of world we live in. Do you think we live in a world where you can say, wow, I wish the people doing this research on Kiwifarms were as understanding toward me as my university professors, were as understanding toward me as my own parents? I wish these people on Kiwifarms were as understanding towards me as my colleagues in this fucking political movement I'm a part of. That's not the world I live in. I live in a world where I can say to any of those people, I wish you would fucking live up to the standard set by Kiwifarms. I had a formal journalistic article published about me by Gawker Media. Gawker Media doesn't exist anymore. All right. They were sued and went out of business. Professional career journalist did research and wrote this fucking article about me. Do you think the standard of journalism was higher or lower than what you find on Kiwifarms? Plant-based news, that piece of shit Klaus at Plant-Based News, he's made a lot of money out of so-called journalism and out of his role as the fucking lead clown in the vegan movement in England, okay? Who do you think sets a higher standard for journalistic integrity and for a kind of juridical process of considering all the facts from both sides? Klaus from Plant-Based News or random strangers who hate me on Kiwifarms? All right. The worst of human nature is when people commit to being voluntarily ignorant. And the best aspect of human nature is when people are willing to do research, to engage in doing research actively so that they can have an informed opinion. And that, in short, is why we should save Kiwifarms.